Hello, everyone. As you know, I've subscribed to the New York Times for the last month. I've kind of vlogged my thoughts and opinions on certain articles. Yeah, I've had quite a bit of fun doing it. My videos have probably been long and maybe a little repetitive and boring. So I'm going to try to condense everything into this one video to explain my perspective and what I thought of the New York Times. So first of all, just like the regular paper, I thought was pretty good. You know, if you want to know what's going on in the world to like very great detail, I think subscribing to the New York Times is good. But also at the same time, I want to say I don't think it's needed. Unless you're following the news professionally, I really don't think you need to have a New York Times subscription or like almost any subscription, just because you could get all this stuff free online a lot of times. You can get a lot of their articles free sometimes, or at least their opinion articles. They get nationally syndicated, and you can pick them up in some other publication for free somewhere else. And yeah, I feel like in the future I'll do a good alternative to the New York Times video for people who want to get extensive news but don't really see the benefit of getting the New York Times. So, why do I not see a benefit of getting the New York Times? Here's my opinion. I am a millennial. I am on the left. I full disclosure, Bernie Sanders supporter. Left things are the things I like to read mostly. Yes, I do like to get out of my bubble sometimes, of course, but I definitely don't have to be subscribed to the New York Times to do that. And the constant thing I think of when I read the New York Times opinion section is, like, is this something that one of my friends would say? Is this a perspective that one of my friends would have? Even if it's one of my further to the right friends or like more centrist friends. And again, I don't really think that it is a perspective that my friends have. Like, most of the writers have perspectives that, you know, maybe like one of my parents' friends would have, for instance. And again, it's not that like reading those perspectives isn't important, but do I want to pay to read those perspectives? Not really. Are the perspectives in the New York Times done so well that it's worth paying extra to read like the best version of these perspectives? Overall, no, I would say. So what is my biggest issue with like the New York Times opinion editorial section, whatever? And the word that kept coming across my brain when I was going through articles, and I read every opinion columnist article, and again, the phrase that would come through my head was out of touch. You know, this applied to multiple writers, multiple days, multiple topics. A lot of times they'd be reoccurring topics. So like statues. Dude, none of my friends are talking about statues. Seriously. Like, let me talk to you about what people my age are talking about. Often, it's like rent, college loans, just money issues, healthcare. Even young people, like, a lot of times they aren't sick, but, you know, it's decently difficult for them to get healthcare and stuff. Sometimes they talk about how Trump is a foolish person. Totally agree, obviously. And that is something that does come up quite a bit in the New York Times. But yeah, I mean, I would say like 40%, probably more, of the articles I read were not only like out of touch, I like don't understand what room people would have these conversations in, or at least a room with people who are my age. Like, it's just like an extremely niche group. And I mean, I talk about politics with people, so like it shouldn't be niche for me, for the opinion section of the New York Times to be talking about things that I would talk about with my friend group. So, can I be more specific? Sure. Let's talk about Ross Douthat. So I did a video where I talk about some good and bad articles of my first week of reading the New York Times opinion section. And Ross Douthat, like, just whoosh, He talked about how, like, the left and, like, Bernie Sanders is losing. So, and he did this, like, the day before Jamal Bowman won his primary against Elliot Engel. What are you doing? Bowman is, like, a very left Sanders-like candidate, and he beat a member of Democratic Party leadership in the House. If Douthat wrote that article after, like, a Bowman loss, it would make a lot more sense. But, like, I'm not even sure he knew that primary was going on. And, like, I'm not sure he knew, like, oh, a member of Democratic leadership might lose tomorrow. Maybe I shouldn't write an article about how, like, the left is, like, losing steam against the more centrist Democrats. And, like, the article itself wasn't even, like, atrociously bad or anything. It was just comically poorly timed, and just, like, the timing of the article made it seem like he didn't even, like, moderately know what was going on with the left. Now, why am I talking about the left so much? Why? Mostly because my generation is mostly left. In multiple polls for the last, like, 4 or 5 years, socialism has polled higher than capitalism among people my age, and you might disagree with that, but again, I'm coming at this from my own perspective, and my perspective is I see these people, I talk to these people, and a lot of these people are fine with, like, socialist ideas. And they aren't persuaded by things like Soviet Union or Venezuela because they know when they hear the word socialist, they think Medicare for all or Green New Deal or something like substantive that would help society. Now, how bad are they covering the left? How out of touch are they? They consistently use, whether it's Ross Douthat, whether it's David Brooks, whoever, they will use the word liberal interchangeably with the word left. And they also do not use the word socialism or socialist or Green New Deal, Medicare for all. These are things that poll exceptionally well among people my age, and people my age like these ideas, quite frankly. And I mean, I like these ideas. And to kind of, like, lump my ideas in with political ideology like liberal, which simply does not share my ideology, even, like, very liberal, that doesn't really fit socialists. And it just makes me feel like I don't exist. Like, I don't have a spot in their editorial room. And not just me, but, like, you know, a lot of the people I talk to, we don't have a spot in their editorial room. I'm going to illustrate this, again, talking about Ross Douthat. I'm sorry, Ross. By the way, don't cancel Ross Douthat, but I don't think he's, like, a bad writer or anything, but I think his perspective just doesn't line up with my generation's. And not only does it not line up, but it doesn't even line up with some of the people I talk to some of the time. And what I'm referring to is his views on gay marriage. I don't know, like, exactly where his views are now. I know he didn't really write about it, but his views were referenced once by Frank Bruni in the last month. And no one, literally no one, I know in, like, the last 8 years has argued against gay marriage. But, like, Ross Douthat wrote endless articles opposed to gay marriage. And even, like, religious people I know, they're, like, okay with it. And, like, to me, it just seems like Douthat, his perspective just doesn't exist among my peers. And again, that's fine. It's just like half the writers have these perspectives that either don't exist or barely exist in my generation among my peers. I mean, you know what it feels like? It feels almost like I'm reading something from, like, a fantasy world. And you guys know, I mean, if you don't know, I review fantasy books. So, like, my microphone right now is getting propped up by fantasy books. My desk is covered in fantasy books. So, yeah, I mean, like, what did I find in the New York Times? A bunch of statue articles, a bunch of Trump bad articles. A lot of those Trump bad things, like, I mean, honestly, they're a dime a dozen. Why would I subscribe to the New York Times to listen to people dunk on Trump when I could go anywhere for that? Are there writers that I like that I feel like, hey, this could be my friend that I'm talking to right now. Or this person has similar views to some that my friends have. And the answer is yes. Jamal Bowie, phenomenal. I haven't met a Jamal Bowie article that I don't like, even if I don't agree with them fully, or I think maybe he's like taking like a different approach than I would take when talking about something. I just love his historical perspectives and all of that. The second person who writes things outside of like the criticizing Trump genre that I read and I actually agree with a lot of what he says, and I think he says things in a good, intelligent way, and I respect him as a person and his background as a Nobel Prize winning economist, is Paul Krugman. The issue that I have with Paul Krugman, and again, not to attack him as a person, not to, like, don't cancel Paul Krugman, but there was something in one of the transcripts of Michelle Goldberg in, The Argument? She talks about Paul Krugman and how he was against the war, but they didn't want him to publish anti-war articles in the mid-2000s. I mean, I was very young then. I didn't really have my political beliefs established, and I mean, maybe some of you guys watching this video didn't even have object permanence established, peekaboo. But if I did have political beliefs at the time, you know, I would have been against the war. And I would have been very disappointed if a writer that I liked at the time were also against the war, but wasn't really being allowed to write about it, or at least being like strongly discouraged to write about it, or whatever Michelle Goldberg said. And my sense of Paul Krugman's writing is he has like this wall up where he's never going to go like left of the wall, right? He's just going to stay at this line as liberal as he thinks he can go, and he's not going to go to the left no matter what. And to me, that's a problem, because myself and many of my peers are to the left of Krugman. And if I don't see that side represented, it just doesn't represent me. It doesn't represent like half my generation. Even if he's a good writer, and even if the people to the right of him are good writers, I just can't recommend the Times. And again, I don't know if Paul Krugman is scared from like a career perspective to move to the left, and that's why he keeps like, you know, staying at this certain point, this certain line, or if like this line is where his actual opinions lie as a Warren Democrat, if you will. And, you know, even from like not socialist, like Democrat Republican angle, or like socialist capitalist angle, or Bernie Warren angle, even from just like pop culture, my generation, something like that Paul Krugman thing of maybe not being allowed to say something because a corporation that you work for doesn't want you to say that like really rubs me the wrong way, seriously. And it rubs people in my generation the wrong way, even like outside of like the political landscape. Even like, you know, think about like if you took a shot every time someone on The Bachelor said the term open and honest, you would be unconscious. Think about it like this, okay? So I've read the New York Times for a month. I don't know where a lot of their writers stand on an issue like healthcare. A bunch of people are dying from coronavirus. A bunch of people are getting sick from it. A lot of them are getting hospital visits, even before COVID. We had a crisis where, whatever it is, like 20 million people don't have healthcare. You know, what does Ross Douthat want to do about that? Or what does David Brooks want to do about that? Do they have solutions? Like, what does Brett Stevens... Of course he's not talking about that. Like, even like Michelle Goldberg, like, what does she want to do about that? Things like that I'm curious about, genuinely. I'm not really curious about who Michelle Goldberg wants for vice president. Even if I like kind of agree with her or whatever. And I should clarify a little bit here. A lot of the articles by opinion writers who write for the New York Times monthly, those are more out of touch, more, to me, meaningless, like a bunch of white noise a lot of times. Whereas the articles by, like, let's say they get a professor from the University of Colorado to write about, like, the economic impacts of not doing anything about climate change, and, like, they're like a professor there, and they've got, like, a doctorate in, economics and, like, a doctorate in, climate science or something. Like, that's, like, a lot of times their articles are phenomenal, and I like them more. Like, again, not always. They're kind of hit or miss, but they're more likely to be good than the New York Times weekly opinion columnist, which is actually, like, a little disappointing because, you want the people who write the good articles to be writing them more. But it also goes to show, like, hey, these aren't New York Times writers, and their articles are oftentimes better than the New York Times opinion writers. So, what do you think? Do you think you should subscribe to the New York Times, or do you think you should try to find these better writers and read their works elsewhere? And to me, yeah, I mean, if the better writers are writing somewhere else, then you should go to that other place. I mean, you wouldn't have to be subscribed to the New York Times for that now, right? But yeah, I'm going to get into the more nitty-gritty in part 2 of my, like, final review of the New York Times when I do a tier list of their opinion writers. So subscribe if you want to see that. That should be up in a few days. Also, let me know what you guys think of this video. I've kind of been all over the place. I don't really, like, have a script or anything, so maybe I'm too all over the place. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. And yeah, like, New York Times, not bad. Out of touch. Wouldn't recommend. Oh, and I'm going to be doing, like, videos in the future of what news sites I do like, I do recommend, writers that I do recommend. I know this video may have been, like, a little negative because it's just like, don't do this. And I'm not saying, like, you don't do it. I'm just saying I'm not doing it and why I'm not doing it. And, I mean, like, obviously I understand that the New York Times is not meant for people who are under 35. Honestly, like, it really isn't. Because even if you're, like, on the right and under 35, it doesn't, like, expose you to more left arguments that your peers are probably talking to you about. And if you're on the left, it, like, just totally ignores you. Like, it pretends you just don't exist and your perspectives don't exist, and it does things like equate Cory Booker to, like, Bernie Sanders, and it's just, like, comically ridiculous. And if you're, like, kind of in the middle, quote unquote, like, you're to the left of the New York Times. Trust me. Hopefully the New York Times starts having more socialist voices, or any socialist voices. And yeah, thank you for watching. See ya.